A warm, happy birthday to all who are physically present here, as well as psychologically and spiritually connected and present. This year's gathering is unusual in several ways. It is smaller on a physical level, larger on a psycho-spiritual level than ever before, accommodating more people than could have sat in this physical space. It is also more widespread at the same time and more extended in time. Just now, more than 60 people are participating online, and over the next 24 hours, many more hundreds will join, extending in time in their own time zones. Paradoxically, though, this gathering is also much more intimately connected than ever before, for the simple reason that the denial of physical approach awakens in the heart a yearning and an intensity of aspiration which helps to connect more deeply. In our hearts, we feel ourselves more closely held, even though physically more separated. In the working of the spiritual evolution, this represents an important step in the manner in which it has been imposed on humanity. Whatever may have been the intentions of the forces that created the pandemic to harm human evolution, the greatness of the supramental power is that it co-opts even what opposes it to accelerate its own purpose. And the result in practice has been that everybody has been forced to introspect, to seek more deeply within for that which they were seeking outside and through external means and external contacts. The very first step of the spiritual life has been compelled upon all of humanity. In that initial effort, there is also an exaggeration of the sense of I. The individuality has been exaggerated and emphasized everywhere, because you are as if left to your own means, not only individually but as every community, every collective, every nation, focusing upon its own independence, its own self-reliance. While earlier such a move might have been centered on the national ego or the collective ego, the passage in between of the weakening of boundaries has made that somewhat different. And the fact that each individual is isolated from others physically does not allow the collective ego to form so easily. And the result has been a deeper introspection even in the collective consciousness for its true sense of identity. All of these have only accelerated the movement towards the spiritual age in the passage through the subjectivism that we are currently going through all over the world. In all these, for those of us who are consciously seeking a spiritual life and practicing, there has been an incredible opportunity as never before. We were as if cut off from the demands of external life and left completely free to dedicate our time and energies for a deeper inner working. And even where we found ourselves tired of that effort, we had no choice. There was no way to survive being alone except by finding something more meaningful within ourselves. In the evolutionary journey in the collective consciousness, this has set a base for something which Sri Aurobindo anticipated as a step in evolution of the formation of collectives which are leaderless. There has been an effort for the last many decades to create leaderless communities, and it is surprising that even such a thought appeared in humanity when for thousands of years it has been almost the norm to have a leader, religious, political, social, and a large mass of humanity that follows, mostly because they are too lazy to think or to find or follow their own individuality, or they are afraid to find their identity and live by a deeper truth and need to conform to a mass and society. And it was relevant for that stage of development. But we are in a transition where the spiritual age demands for each one to find our true individuality, which is spiritual, but also to connect in a collective, which is spiritual. To be able to be entirely free individually, and yet to be able to live in perfect harmony collectively. Efforts to find this balance of freedom and equality and harmony have failed because they based themselves on external mechanisms, social or political or economic. And the spiritual age compels us to base this effort now on our spiritual reality. This takes 3 steps in our personal effort. The first step is increasingly to become conscious of the divine presence within us as ourselves, our deepest soul, or the presence of the Supreme Lord and the Divine Mother within. As we approach and grow more conscious of that, as its influence, as her love begins to fill our hearts, as the divine light begins to fill our minds, as the divine impulse of inspiration begins to guide our actions and lead our will, there is increasingly a centering of ourselves in the truth that we truly are. As a first step, this is good, but it is not sufficient. As we grow in this deepening of the relationship with the divine within, we must begin consciously to perceive that presence outside us, at first surrounding us equally, and then equally present in everything and everyone as a sustained, widespread influence, presence, love, light, power, in whatever way we perceive at first. And this leads then to a third step, where we perceive that presence equally individualized in each person and begin to relate to that individuality in them from within us. In the video yesterday of Panditji's talk, we saw the emphasis that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother gave on relating to the divine and through the divine with all else. In Savitri, there is this beautiful line that goes something like this: all aims were lost in her, then found in her. And this is the movement and the rhythm of the yoga from the individual to the collective space. As this develops, and it may take time, there is a natural affinity that begins to build among those who so share this aspiration and participate in this effort. Each one of us begins to as if perceive that same effort and that same aspiration in others, in the collective. And a deeper bond begins to form spontaneously, more true, more lasting, because more true. And even as we discover, lasting across lives, across incarnations, we meet sometimes, having shed our earlier incarnating personalities or bodies, we meet sometimes again, and we may not remember here in the surface personality, but we feel deep within the affinity and the bond. Such was the affinity that most of us experienced in our relationship with Panditji, and with many, the connection was spontaneous, instantaneous, and a recognition profound. Even when some of us have been born after Panditji's passing, on reading some of his books, seeing a photograph or experiencing something, that recognition was there. And the fact that it is there shows us that somewhere within that link has been built in the past. The mother made this observation to the sadhakas and the children in the class that she took in the playground. She said, all of you are here because you were promised that you will be given an opportunity when the time came for the fulfillment. And she said, you do not remember, but I remember. And this truth is profound. While at that time it represented something special for the people physically gathered, today that truth is equally valid and special for all of us gathered psychologically and spiritually, wherever we may be physically at this moment. In this gathering, we are coming together as we have come together before, going back many ages perhaps, for the same work for which we have dedicated ourselves, perhaps at different stages of our journey, different levels of maturity and experience or readiness, but nevertheless for the same work. And the work has been going on for thousands of years, and we have forgotten here on the surface, but deep within, in the divine presence, in our true soul, the memory is not lost. And it is the recognition from there that brings us together. And that's why, while this gathering is larger, it is also, and more spread out, it is also more intimately held and connected. There is a practical difficulty when we sit in our own homes and connect thus, that there is a mix of the vibrations of the space of our usual daily life and that space or that consciousness to which we connect. But it's a small barrier which is relatively easy to overcome by a little bit of concentration and remembrance. It is precisely this little barrier that the mother referred to when she withdrew from active life in the ashram's physical spaces. For many decades, she was present everywhere in all activities, even on the physical grounds, training people on how to note the performance of individual athletes or gymnasts, encouraging them, suffusing them with her presence and force. But at some point when she withdrew from the physical space, and it was sudden, unexpected, there was sudden chaos and then this reaction of the loss that people felt. Even a similar transition took place in the history of the ashram when all were held in her consciousness and she did the sadhana in each. And at some point when large numbers came, she had to stop that. A small gap was created on a physical level, but spiritually and psychologically, she said, she is always present in the same way. But we have to make that little effort to link. And somehow that same effort is being imposed on all of us, wherever we are in the world. But as a first step, that effort being made, the rest opens, and somehow space and time cease to be boundaries. Not only to the physical space of the ashram, of Sri Aurobindo's room, of the mother's room, and such sacred gatherings, but if we can do that, we can equally connect directly to the presence of the mother in her universality. Feel her equally within us as we feel her around us, as we feel her everywhere else with the same intensity. These are small steps which are well within our reach, and this occasion of the global pandemic has been very useful to assist for those who so seek this to grow in these directions. We do miss notably this year Sri Rajagopalji's physical presence. He passed on, left his body in November after the November 24th darshan for which he waited. And he was one of those whose life was turned by the touch and contact with Panditji so radically that he shared his own experience with others with a certain intensity and inspiration, that many thousands were turned and awakened because of his touch. An exceptional being with an exceptional following, primarily based in Chennai and Tamil Nadu. But we do miss him physically. But when we connect thus spiritually and psychologically, all of us as the spiritual family are present. For the program today, we will have one short meditation now in closing, and we will begin that meditation with a collective chant of Om together 3 times, after which you are invited to partake of the prasad as usual, as well as a message card which we distribute every year. The message this year is a selection from one of Panditji's writings, in which he speaks of what happens to us when we experience the mother's love. It was true not only of his living experience which touched us, but it must become true for each one of us in our lives. And as a message, it is equally an inspiration and a guideline. Later at 9:30, normally we used to go to the ashram and meditate in Sri Aurobindo's room, but the room is closed and the facility of access to the ashram is currently restricted, and so we will gather here and be in Sri Aurobindo's presence from 9:30 to 9:45, and you can be here physically or virtually as you choose. The space will be open throughout the day. You may freely come and partake of prasad or be here. And at 7 p.m, we have the usual meditation, 7 to 7:30, for which also you are most welcome. In remembrance of Panditji, in experiencing of his presence and love and inspiration, in this sacred space of the Divine Mother's and Sri Aurobindo's presence, we gather equally as children of the Divine Mother, as a collective worldwide, aspiring towards a spiritual and a supramental life increasingly, that she may fill our hearts and our minds with her love, with her light and knowledge and power and ananda, that we may become focal points for her to manifest these in the world, in the whole universe, and especially among each other in our collective life as a spiritual family. We hold this aspiration together as we chant Om together 3 times and then meditate for a short while. It's still showing audio? Okay. For those who are watching online, I will share the card, message card. It will a beautiful picture of the mother and with the message that says, "For one who has received and imbibed something of the mother's love, what personal objective can there be except to pour out the love that has flooded his being, pour at the feet of the mother, and pour out of his heart on all those with whom he is circumstanced to come into touch." MP Pandit, December 1973. One more thing. We are also releasing today the video, the complete set of Panditji's talks on the mother in video form in a pen drive. So volume 2 of that is completed today and released.